Welcome to the Perfectly Flawed podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. For those that don't know you, would you like to give a bit of an overview of who you are?
I'm David Curtis. I am 20 years old. I swim for Team USA and North Carolina State University in the United States. I've been swimming for 12, 13 years up to this point, and I'm super excited to be on the podcast.
That's awesome. And obviously, I'm biased because I have grown up in swimming. So it's pretty exciting for me to interview a like-minded person. How did you get into swimming?
My swimming really started when I was with the YMCA. I learned how to swim through their kind of learn to swim program where they taught basic water skills at the YMCA, and from there, it just kind of sprouted out into my career in swimming. I picked it up relatively quickly, and they were like, "You should try out for a swim team." And right after I learned how to swim, we started kind of investigating into how and what I could do in the sport of swimming, and it just kind of blew up from there.
Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty, I don't want to say stock standard answer, but like I feel like it's a very common way to get into the sport. You sort of learn to swim and then it sort of progresses from there. Was ever a point for you that you realized like I'm kind of good at this or like I really want to pursue this further and make this a career?
Yeah, I would definitely say when I was like 15, I started to really see success. 14, 15, I was like, I really enjoy this. I'm really having fun with all this. And kind of from then on out, it was more of a like, I want to keep making these big level meets. I want to keep competing at the high levels. Sort of, excuse me, like an addiction almost. I was really into the whole competing at a high level, competing for bigger teams. So like at that time, it was zones for me. I would travel with the zone team up into New York and swim with them, like kind of wanting more and more and more from the level starting at zones to world championships. It kind of kept me in the sport and made me want to progress and keep getting better and just keep on swimming.
Yeah, and I've heard so many people describe, that success or that feeling as so addictive. And I understand what you mean when you say that, but there might be some people that don't quite grasp that concept. If you could like really explain that feeling, that high and that addiction, how would you describe it?
Man, it's really hard to describe because I don't even it's really difficult to describe simply just because Um, it really only comes fleeting every once in a while. I mean, you train all this time, 20 plus hours a week. For me, for an 18-second race, where as like you kind of hit that moment and all of that work, all of that effort that you put in, it meant something. You hit the goal that you wanted, and it's a feeling of just overwhelming self-accomplishment that me and I'm sure many other swimmers kind of yearn and hope for. That continues to keep us excelling. And again, it's not necessarily even more just about myself. It's competing against these other high level athletes, either getting beat by them or beating them. There's kind of it kind of installs a fire into you where if you get beat, you want to keep training and get better and try to beat them. Whereas if you beat them, kind of staying at that position of power almost and just trying to keep yourself on top of the food chain is also a big contributing factor.
Yeah, and it's crazy, as you say, like it is so fleeting. And, swimming sort of runs on a 4-year cycle. To be chasing that feeling that we get so very rarely and train for 4 years to try and get that, couple seconds of that feeling, it's pretty crazy when you think of it like that. What was your first junior? I know you were quite prominent in your junior years on the international stage. What was your first competition like on that stage?
My first international competition was actually in Canada. It was the Mel's Ajax meet. I went with the national junior team, which is the kind of the developmental program that is below the senior national team here in the US. I went out to them. I went out with them to Canada. I believe it was in British Columbia in Canada. I believe that's what it's called. We went to and swam at one of the meets called Mel's Ajax. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed kind of being with at that time was the fastest of the fast young developing athletes, and it was just really cool to be in that company with them and swim on an international stage. So I really hadn't, I believe up to that point, I hadn't competed internationally at all. So it was a really long trip, kind of a lot of responsibility put on my shoulders. Mom and dad weren't there to help me. It was really kind of a new experience that I really, really enjoyed and that I wanted more of because later that year I qualified for World Juniors in Budapest, which was kind of a huge step up from Mel Zajac, but still really good and motivating for me to continue and make better meets from there.
Yeah, and what was Budapest like for you?
Stressful, a lot of stress, a lot of worrying, a lot of sweating, a lot of negative thoughts. But it was a really good experience regardless because it kind of opened my eyes into the international world competition stage. So I'd really only ever competed in the US, not even as much nationally, kind of almost locally, regionally. I had never really taken that step out of the national stage besides the Mount Zazek meet, which was somewhat on the tame side of an international meet, I would say. But it kind of opened my eyes to say, wow, there is other people all around the world that are faster than me and that I want to compete against and that I will see if I continue to compete at this level. And it gave me that want to be back on that stage and to compete and represent US.
Yeah, and what is it like for you before a race? You sort of described there that it was very stressful and there's a lot of nerves and negative thoughts. Can you sort of elaborate on that a bit more?
I tend to be a nervous person, an overthinker at times. It's definitely gotten a lot better as I've gotten more experience under my belt, especially this last World Championships. I kind of feel like I've grown a lot in that aspect. But me going into races at Olympic trials, World Championships, even national level meets like NCAA's, ACC's, that's kind of the East Coast area. I will try to prevent, but I will sometimes find myself in this kind of loop of, am I supposed to be here or am I fast enough to be at this level? Kind of second guessing my ability. I tend to be, I'm not very much of an optimist, so I'm not really thinking in the most positive of lights usually. So I will find myself kind of getting into that loop mindset of, yeah, this am I supposed to be here? Is this really for me? But as I've progressed, getting to bigger meets, I mean, my second NCAA's was so much easier than my first. Kind of being in that mindset of like I've been here before, I'm supposed to be here. Kind of having that experience on my belt helps me get out of that mindset and then perform at the best of my ability as opposed to being stuck in that kind of the debilitating mindset that will actually end up hurting my performance.
Yeah, and that was sort of like the next question that I had for you is, do you think the more sort of success and the more achievements you've accomplished, that those thoughts either, lessen or increase because, sometimes we think that, oh, once I get this, like it'll be okay, or once I achieve this, like I'll be fine. But do you think that sometimes that comes with more expectation because now you are at this higher level that there's more expectation that you're going to continue to perform and continue to be better?
Success for me isn't necessarily a positive. As you were saying about expectation, I'll often say I do really well in this meet. Then not only is there expectations from the media, but there's also expectations put on myself, like I've achieved this, so I should be able to do this. And then it starts to, backfire, and then negative thoughts start to come from that. One big thing that I've been focusing on and talking with a lot of coaches, including one of my friends' coaches, Wilma Wong, and my coach at NC State, Michael Barrick, just kind of to disconnect myself from the expectations because it's only going to end up leading to a negative mindset. But then also just finding a way to relax the thoughts of am I supposed to be here? Negative thoughts that go through my head. Trying to disconnect from that is going to inevitably allow myself to do what I've trained to do because my coaches see more in me than I will always see in myself. So, trying to disconnect from my perspective is definitely something we work on to help with that.
Yeah, and I think we're always our own worst critic in that way. And I think as athletes, it's probably, amplified even further. I've seen, there's been media out there and compared to to people like Caleb Dressel, who's a really big name in swimming at the moment. How does that feel to be compared to someone like that? And does that and having that external expectations, how do you deal with the external as well as the internal?
I don't necessarily see those comparisons or see Caleb Dressel as an expectation or being compared. I just see him, I redirect that expectation or on look to him as a goal. I mean, Caleb Dressel is one of the fastest 50 freestylers in the history of the sport. That's just a fact. And if you look at the stats of that fact, he is what, 2104. He's the pinnacle of speed in freestyle. I don't necessarily see that as an expectation of being compared to him. I see that as a goal. Caleb Dressel is the fastest. If I want to be the fastest, I have to get through him first. Well, not first, but he's probably more the end of the tunnel. But I try to redirect the energy of David Curtis, Caleb Dressel, and focus it more to Caleb Dressel is the top of the food chain. David Curtis is down here. How am I going to get David Curtis to be at that top of the food chain? And by redirecting that, it kind of allows myself to have more of a positive outlook and allows myself to make goals, small goals, long-term goals to get to where he's at, instead of kind of sitting in that weird negative area of, man, I'm being compared to Caleb Dressel. Am I supposed to be? Am I supposed to be here? Am I supposed to be being compared to him? It redirects that negative energy and makes it to positive energy and kind of allows that outlet to be made into positive ways to help me get to where he eventually is, or at least try to get to where he is.
Yeah, no, I love flipping that negative into positive. It's really great. And obviously, you said earlier that, you're 20, so you're still quite young. You have like a massive career ahead of you. What was it like stepping on the senior stage for the first time?
It was scary. I'm not gonna lie because I mean I'm what I was on the 4x50 freestyle relay, and in front of me is what 6'8" Manitou, just absolute linebacker, football player. I'm relatively short and I'm not a big person at all. And him being older obviously is gonna he's gonna have grown more than I am. But I mean I'm seeing all these veteran athletes like Kyle Chalmers. I'm sure you know a lot about Kyle Chalmers and even at Duel in the Pool, Cody Simpson, stuff like that. I'm not as experienced as they are, and I won't be for a long time. It's just when I'm on that stage with these athletes, it's frightening because I am, in terms of the meets that I've attended, the places that I've been, way out of my depth. And what I'm trying to do is when I'm on that stage and I'm learning constantly every day is to disconnect from that way out of my depth mindset and just do what I'm meant to do on that senior stage because I am there. That this is the mindset that I have is that I am there on that stage and I am next to them. So I'm probably supposed to be there. And by kind of I would say kind of hyping myself up, I'm able to remove the nerves of being next to Kyle Chalmers or Florent Manitou and reducing the names and just kind of allowing myself to do what I've trained to do instead of focusing on how out of depth I actually am.
Yeah. Do you ever sit back and be like, wow, like I'm here competing in another country in the sport that I absolutely love against these world-class athletes and I get to compete next to them?
Every time I step, especially in Melbourne of all things, I stepped on deck and I just stood there. I was like, I am in Australia for the second time this year alongside the world's fastest athletes in one of the nicest pools I've ever been to. It was just a surreal moment where I'm just like, wow, I am here, and I just kind of let it soak in before I started getting into competition. We showed up a couple days early in Melbourne, which was super nice. So we got to train a little bit, get a feel for the pool, get a feel for the people. I love Australia. People there are fantastic. But it it's just every time I step on a pool deck like that, even in Minnesota on the national stage for NCAA's, I'm like, wow, I'm here. I get to compete at this level, and it's every single deck that I stand on for those type of meets. Truly an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's dive into Melbourne further, world champs, because obviously I'm a bit biased living in Melbourne. I love it here. What was that like for you? Because I know it wasn't the results that you particularly were hoping for. But what was the experience like, and how do you deal with results that you don't always, anticipate?
In the moment, it's hard to accept not swimming fast. I mean, you've trained for this event and you've tapered for this event. You've flown halfway across the world. I want to swim fast, but sometimes that's just not the case. Um, it was a great learning experience. That's what I've kind of pulled from it after further reflection with coaches. I was lucky enough to have my head coach, Braden, there. He was the head coach of Team USA, so it was really good to have a familiar face on deck, kind of to relate to and talk to. But it was a really good learning experience because I learned a lot of things about myself, and I also learned a lot of things about the international stage, that being my first international senior trip that I had. Um, Handling letdowns, mostly for me, it's looking at it from an analytical side. It's, hey, I did some things right, but I failed on other things. I mean, you're looking at 50 free, 100 freestyle. They're very short races. So even the smallest of issues can cause the biggest of outcomes in that race. Like if I kick, if there's some issues with kick or there's some issues with pull, my race is going to be off because being the perfectionist I am in the 1500 freestyle, you have to be perfectionist to excel at the world stage or any stage at that. So trying to handle the loss well, yes, in the moment it may be difficult, but taking the analytical stance and watching video review, talking to coaches about how you can get better definitely helps. That feeling of not like I don't know if unaccomplishment is the right word, but like not being able to accomplish what you thought you could. It takes the weight off of that and more like I've got another 50 freestyle in meters that's probably going to happen in my lifetime at some point. How do I fix what I did wrong today so next time when I've got that same race it's a different story.
Yeah, and I'd love to know how, you view success versus failure. Do you view them in the same way, or how are they different?
um i I've been told I very rarely give myself credit, and that's true because my mindset is probably not the healthiest, but I view myself as successful once I'm at the top of the food chain. When I say top of the food chain, when I'm on that podium at the Olympic Games, when I'm first, second, or third in that capacity. I'm not there yet, so I haven't succeeded fully. Failure for me is not nailing down the details that I should have nailed, or maybe even going the time that I should have gone. It Failure for me is as important as success because when I fail, that just means that I can figure more stuff out and then get closer to that success. Because in order for me to get the success that I want to get on that podium for the Olympic trials, I understand that I'm going to fail a bunch of times, a lot of times at that. So for me, in order for me to, kind of reach that, I acknowledge that failure is going to be a part of that, no matter how hard it is or the scale that it is. It's just building blocks, honestly.
Yeah, and what you're saying that actually reminds me of something that I saw on TikTok of all places, and it was like if you knew that you were going to get 100 no's before you were going to get a yes, would that change the way you viewed those no's? And it's like, okay, well, I'm one closer to a yes now. And I think what you've said there sort of really, you know, explains that really well in that, it's just one closer and it's another learning curve. It means I'm going to be better next time.
Yeah, for sure. It's just all part of the process. My coach always says, trust the process. We go through the whole college year just getting beaten up. Our coaches just throw us in the ringer every single day, tell us to do this and that. We throw our body on the line every single day, and then they expect us to get up on the block and race. Sometimes those races aren't great. Most of the time they aren't great, but whenever we have those moments where they're not great, they tell us to trust the process because at the end of the year, when everything is connected, we're all rested and tapered, it's going to connect them. So it's just a process of, like you said, 100 no's. At some point, there's going to be a yes. There might be 1,000 no's, there might be 100 no's till I get there, but at some point, my end goal is to get a yes. And I just got to analyze those no's for all that they are to help me get close to that yes. Maybe reduce the amount of no's, improve the amount of no's, because again, the end goal for everyone is to get that yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hate it when my coach says to tell me to trust the process because for me, I like being in control of things. And when he says that to me, it's like now I have not necessarily no control, but it sort of removes a level of control for me. Like, okay, I just have to, you know, trust, as they say, in the process of what they're telling me, and it's eventually going to work out. And just not knowing. I think the fear of not knowing can be really hard. How do you go with that?
It was only until these last 2 years where I fully kind of accepted I have to trust my coaches because they know they're successful. They're at one of the top levels of coaching. Like they know what they're doing. A lot of that has to do with trusting yourself that um, you are on the right path, you are on the right career path, you're doing what you're supposed to do. Accountability, because you have to hold yourself accountable to that process. Otherwise, you could lie to yourself and say, trust the process, not do what you're supposed to. And then when you're at the end of the tunnel and there's nothing there, it's on you. So you got to hold yourself accountable during that process and then trust in your coaches because there's a reason you have a coach. They're there to help you. Their only goal is to assist you in getting to the end of the tunnel to get that yes. So installing trust in them, for me, it's installing trust in Braden is really it's difficult at times, but it is truly what you need to do in order to really reach that end.
Yeah. And when you're getting absolutely flogged at training, which I know happens on a pretty regular basis, how do you push through that? On how do you, wake up the next morning when your alarm goes off knowing, shit, this is going to be a really brutal session this morning? How do you get yourself out of bed? How do you push through?
I tell this to a lot of my age group swimmers, and even I give this advice to older out of age group swimmers is set goals. I set short term, midterm, and long term goals. Short term being that day is that I've got a goal for that day. Sometimes it's work your underwaters better, or make sure you get this assignment done for class so you have more time to recover, or sit in the Normatec for an hour each day so that you get that recovery so you're faster that next practice. Those short term goals kind of help me wake up every morning and be like, all right, I've got to do this today. I've got this goal. Let's meet that goal. And then I'm more motivated to get up that day and kind of go. I have a purpose, which assists with getting up that day. Or midterm goals are kind of more, I'd say, week to week. Like coach wants me to hold these times in practice. How am I going to do that? I'm going to work throughout this entire week trying to assess where that's going to happen, whether it's a push off the wall, whether it's a better breakout, kind of like in the name, midterm goals. And where the long term goals fit in, it's I want to make world championships or I want to make the Olympic Games. I want to medal at world championships. The long term goals are the end of the tunnel goals. For me, it was making duel in the pool. I know that's not necessarily the world championships caliber meet, but for me, it was really important because the United States versus Australia is a huge meet. I mean, everyone goes to watch it. Everyone in the U.S. is watching it. It's important between our two countries, and I always love when I put the flag on. It's probably one of the best feelings when I'm selected for a meet. It's like I get to represent my country in an international competition. Not many people get to do that, and I really cherish each time that I got selected. Um, so its long term goals can range between just things I want to do with my career and where I see myself. I'm actually wearing a dual pool shirt right now. Um, Thought it was rather appropriate considering I'm on an Australian podcast. But yeah, it's just setting goals really gives me purpose each day and allows myself to wake up and then have these goals in mind. And when things get hard, I just remind myself if you push through this or if you get through this, you're that much closer to getting that end goal. So there's no lack of motivation there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I guess, on the topic of goals, then, what are your upcoming goals for the season? I mean, Paris is only just around the corner now. I feel like it's coming up really fast, because it's only been 3 years this time. But what are your upcoming goals?
My long-term goal is to make Paris. It's going to be a long battle because the United States is such a competitive atmosphere. I mean, there's tons and tons of fast people, and I really have to nail my details and be the best that I can in order to make that team. So that's the long-term goal is that to make the Olympic Games. In terms of my NCAA goals, I'm not quite sure where they sit yet since the season just ended. I kind of do an NCAA goal meeting later, like closer to the season start. Maybe in September, I'll sit down with the coaches and be like, hey, these are my goals. How are we going to get there? But the closest goal that I have is to make world championships. I mean, we're looking at world champ trials coming up in June of this year, so it's coming up relatively fast. So my close goal right now for long course is to make that meet, and if I don't make that meet, excel at the highest level possible within the U.S. that I can because there's such a limited window that I have to swim long course post NCAA season.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the next question I have for you is, if younger David could see you now, how do you think he would react?
Man, I am not sure. I think he would be surprised. I am in a place that I didn't think I would ever be in. I honestly didn't think I'd be on podcasts talking to people like you or meeting athletes all over the country and all over the world. Kind of, I'll truly be honest with you. I didn't think I'd be as successful as I am. I'm not saying I'm super successful, but I mean, I didn't think I'd be where I am right now. Obviously, my coaches have helped a lot on that journey, and teammates of mine have helped me lift up. But I mean, as an example, my idol, Cullen Jones, he's an Olympic swimmer in the United States, one of very few successful African American swimmers in the United States. I didn't think I'd have his phone number in my phone and I would be talking to him, let alone meeting him at a meet and chatting with him. A lot of surprise, definitely, a lot of disbelief because I'm still kind of in awe and so honored to be where I am representing the United States, making the friends that I am, being in the position I am, because I am very lucky to have great coaches, great teammates that have elevated my game to where I'm at today and kind of pushed me to be the best that I am.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess swimming is very much an individual sport, but I think it's underestimated how much our teammates play a part, and obviously we know our coach plays an important part, but there's so many other people that play a role in our success. How important do you think is it for you to have those teammates in your squad and, those external people that you have?
It's everything. I mean, I wouldn't be who I am today without my teammates. NC State is such every single day it is a competitive atmosphere. Everyone is racing as if it's the last race they ever have. And that creates kind of a competitive but healthy like training environment to the point where everyone just wants to better everyone else. And you being at the top of your game is only going to positively contribute to that competitive atmosphere. And that's going to lift someone else up. Say you're at your best this day. There's somebody right below you, and they're going to keep pushing you and pushing you and pushing you until your ceiling is higher than you ever thought it would be because they want to race you, you want to race them. And it's a healthy working environment that we all feed off of each other's energy and off of each other's speed and want to push each other as to be as fast as we can. That's the good thing about the NCAA is at the end of the day, my coach always says NCAA championship is all about points. We are there to push each other and help each other get as many points as we can because you are swimming for the team. I'm swimming for NC State. My goal is to get as many points as I can for our team so that we can excel at the highest level. And by doing that, it doesn't just happen in meets, it happens every single day in practice as we're pushing each other to get to that threshold and to go over that threshold so that we can score as many points as we can throughout the year.
You love swimming and it's obviously something you're super passionate about and it consumes a very large part of your life. How do you go with, being David first rather than being the swimmer first?
I prioritize me time a lot. I like to have my swimming life and then I like to have my David life, like you said. I'd make sure they're very disconnected. I don't let one bleed into the other because my swimming life is affected if I let it bleed into my David life. I'm David first, and then I'm a swimmer second, where I prioritize me time. I prioritize time with my girlfriend. It's very important for me to kind of disconnect because at the end of the day, swimming isn't everything that I have. At some point, my body's going to say, you're done. And I'm going to have to go out and live the rest of my life, get a job, do things that probably are not have don't have any relation to swimming at all. Swimming is a very big part of me, but it is not everything. And I like to make sure that it stays that way so that I can keep my personality and that I can still enjoy other things that are, outside of the pool.
Yeah, and obviously, because, you're training, 20 plus hours a week, it's pretty hard to have, a life in quotations outside of that. What advice or tips would you give around in terms of what you do to really keep the two separate?
Everyone has free time. Now, I don't suggest skipping schoolwork or skipping important mandatory tasks to make more free time, but at some point in the day, you have 10 minutes of downtime. Maybe disconnect to listen to some music, play a game on your phone. Just disconnect from whatever you're currently doing and allow yourself to fully take a deep breath and relax because it's important to really make sure that you have time away from whatever, like, say, swimming or if you're doing a different sport. You're going to have free time at some point, and what you want to do is make sure that you utilize that free time in the best way that you can so that you can not, by doing so, you're going to make that other life, say swimming or any other sport, it's going to be more enjoyable because you're ready to go back to that and doesn't necessarily feel like a job or a chore. For younger swimmers, I would just cherish the time that you have because when you get into college swimming, you don't really have time. You're either doing school, swimming, lifting, or sleep. So cherish the time that you have and use it to the best of your ability so that you can also be at the best that your best when you're in your set or given sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And you never know when something's going to happen. I mean, touch wood that nothing does, but you could get an injury tomorrow that mean you might not be able to swim again. And you just don't know when your time's up. We don't always get to choose when we want to leave the sport. So I think making the most of that time is super important.
For sure.
On a completely different note, do you have an embarrassing sports story to share?
Actually, I have a I had a recently, this was this week. I'm not sure if you know who Rowdy Gaines is. He's one of the biggest voices and announcers in the United States ever for swimming. Had an amazing swimming career himself. He's just probably one of the most accomplished American athletes of all time. I was speaking to what I thought was just another announcer at the YMCA Nationals in Greensboro. I was there stopping by, saying hello to some people, saying hello to Cullen, who had stopped by to help out with the meet. And I was talking to the announcer, not knowing at all who he was, until I saw his name tag. And then I realized I was like, "Oh man, is this are you Rowdy Gaines?" And he said, "Yeah." And then I was like, "Wow, it was embarrassing because I had absolutely no clue who he was at that time. And he's such a down to earth, humble, like nice guy. Like you wouldn't necessarily think he was the voice of the Olympics for swimming in the United States. Like you wouldn't make that connection just right off the bat. So is that was definitely an embarrassing story that, that I had in terms of not being able to recognize probably one of the most recognizable faces and voices in the sport.
Yeah, not ideal at all. I'd love to do three questions to sort of wrap up our chat today. And the first one is, what is something that you're most proud of about yourself?
I most proud. One thing that I'm really enjoying and what that I'm proud of myself right now is working with African American athletes all over the country. I mean, there's a significant underrepresentation here in the United States of African American athletes. I'm not sure if it's the same in Australia, but here in the U.S. there's a severe underrepresentation. So I live every day trying to prove stereotypes wrong, bring more African Americans into the sport, kind of promote it in that aspect. And my goal for that is just to continue to kind of promote myself and give African Americans kind of a light and to say, hey, swimming is a sport that you can also do, and come join me and try it out and see what it's like, and give people motivation to join the sport.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely something to be proud of. I think, unfortunately, there is a large underrepresentation in all aspects, not just sport, in swimming, and in a lot of countries. So it's great that you're helping bridge that gap. The next question I have for you is, do you have a favorite quote or the best piece of advice that you've been given?
Oh man, these are good questions that I have to think. Um, I given I talked about this briefly before as well. Um, the best piece of advice that was given to me by actually Colin Jones was it's just a simple sentence like you're meant to be here. I mean, you don't have to be at the Olympic trials level to understand that. I mean, if you're at a certain meet, if you're at a certain competition. You're there for a reason. You're not out of your depth. You wouldn't be at that competition that you're at if you were out of your depth. I was at the Olympic trials and I was kind of panicking. I was hyperventilating. I was getting really, really scared before my semifinal in the 50 meter. And Colin was there. He calmed me down. He was like, I was like, look, I don't know if I'm supposed to be here. Like, I'm way out of my depth. He's like, you wouldn't be in this final. You wouldn't be where you are if you weren't supposed to be here. So he kind of like, I give that advice to a lot of people who say they're nervous before the race. I'm like, you're meant to be there. You're in that spot. You're in that position for a reason. You've competed. You've succeeded to a certain extent. You're there for a reason. So just let it all go. Yeah, but that's definitely my advice for anybody at any level.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, something that I've heard someone tell me before too is that the nerves are there because you care. So, like, use them. Like, you wouldn't be nervous if you didn't care about it. So, it's
Mhm,
obviously, yes, it's important, but use them to your advantage.
for
The
sure.
last question I have for you is, do you have any advice or tips for those that are listening?
I would first tell them to make a goal. Make a big, what seems to be unrealistic goal. And just work every day to meet that unrealistic goal. My unrealistic goal when I was a kid was to make the Olympic trials. My parents were like, okay, David, yeah, sure, sure. And I worked every day to meet that goal. It seemed unrealistic when I was 14, but when I was 18, I was in the Olympic trial final. Like it is possible. Anything is possible, really. And it all starts with you deciding whether you want to make that goal and working to get to that goal every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it takes a lot of work. So hats off to you and a massive congrats to everything you've achieved so far. And I can't wait to see where your career takes you. So thank you so much for jumping on this chat with me today. I really appreciate it.
Of course, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Would love to have you back in Melbourne at some time.
For sure. I would love to be back in Melbourne. That is a great place to be.